Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Today we'll be taking a look at a game from the 2024 the Tech Mahindra Global Chess League. Now this is from the fourth round actually, and white is Peter Svidler and black is Richard Rapport. So actually I know a little bit like some information about Richard Rapport, so the one who is black in this game. He is actually so in the 2023 World Chess Championship, he is actually Dean Liren's opening preparation. So like they have a team and he helped like Dean to prepare for the openings and everything. So because like Richard's opening, like he is really good at openings and every like all the theories, he knows like a lot of what like his opening tree, like his like the openings in his mind, like all the variations are really wide. He knows a lot of them, the very sided lines and also the main lines. And actually he is also pretty like he's like playing very solid, and also he like whenever there are like tactics or everything, he can also still find them. So yeah, he is actually a very strong player, and in this tournament where already like 4 rounds like he has already played, he won all of the rounds. So this is actually a very good result. All right, so in this game, he is facing Grandmaster Peter Svidler, who is actually also a very strong Grandmaster, even a little bit higher rated than he is, like than Richard. So, and yeah, but in the end, the game had, like, there are some time scrambles in the end, but immediately in the end game part, Richard did found a way to increase his advantage. So let's see how, like, what happened. Alright, so Peter started with e4 and Richard played c6, the Caro-Kann, d4, d5, and e5. So bishop f5, this is all very theory, like standard, knight f3, e6, bishop e2, bishop g6. Like these are all just the opening lines, so I don't really need to do any comments about these moves. Short castle, knight e7, c3, knight f5, knight bd2, and now c5. So actually, this pawn structure, if it's pretty familiar to you, it is it is very similar to the French openings pawn structure. But the main difference is that the light square bishop, instead of being inside the pawn chains, it is now out of the pawn chain and on this diagonal. So yeah, that is the main difference. And in the game, d takes c5 was played. Now here actually queen a4 would have been a better choice here to give a very annoying check. And after, for example, actually both of like 96 or 97, queen d7 are both possible. 90s like are all possible. 97 is the best option here, and after, for example, queen b3 attacking this pawn, for example like queen c7, I think it's better for white to keep the pawn structure fixed in the center, like not trading, like just waiting for black to trade instead of taking like by himself. But in the game, however, Peter took on c5 immediately, which like is not a move that I really like, because now it just helps black to develop, and the bishop is now on a very good diagonal, putting pressure on the f2 pawn, and this e5 pawn may also be a weakness in the future. So anyways, knight b3 was played. Now this is actually a really mistake, close to a mistake, like an inaccuracy. Here, actually, black can go b4 to kick this bishop, and if the bishop were to go, for example, like bishop b6, now white will go a4, and for example, like if like black cannot really go a5 because now there's just bishop a3, so like stopping black from going short castle, because if black goes short castle, then there's b takes a5, the bishop will be attacking the rook. So if bishop like in this position, it is not that easy for black to play. So that is why in the game, but actually in the game b4 wasn't played, which was actually a miss, like missing some opportunities, and instead knight b3 was played. So like it is also attacking the bishop, but b4 is a much more active and aggressive way than knight b3. Bishop b6, bishop d3, and now knight c6. So like all of these moves that white have been playing, they're a little bit soft. They aren't really like doing anything to black. So black is just like developing all of his pieces step by step, like in black is still in his comfort zone, and white is, I think, now getting a little bit worse in this position because black will always have some d4 ideas in the future. So in the game, queen e2 was played, and now knight h4. Now, actually, knight h4 is a very interesting move because offering a trade of knights as well as a trade of bishops. Like most of the players here would just go for short castle, maybe not even noticing this knight h4 idea. But in the game, Richard saw this very interesting move right away, and actually it works here. It is one of the best moves. As good as short castle, I think. So this tricky move is like knight h4. The main problem is that, I mean, you can either take on h4 or take on g6. Both are fine. The main point here is that if you take on g6, now black will not take the bishop, but instead go knight takes f3 first with check, and after white takes with the queen, now black will go h6, g6 to open up the h file. So this is better for black. And if white takes the knight first with knight h4, here you can actually consider taking the knight first or taking the bishop. Like both are fine. Taking the knight is slightly better. And after, for example, because now white cannot really take on g6, there's h6, g6, this file is completely open to black scope, and this is just simply better for black. And probably here, well, I'll just go for something like bishop b5 or bishop e3, just simply developing, and after bishop takes, queen takes, in this position here, black can win this e5 pawn. So you can see that black is, the reason that black is trying to trade this knight off is trying to get rid of one of the defenders of the e5 pawn, and also trying to simplify the position as well as opening up the h file. Knight h4 is a very creative move, and after knight e1, white says, I'm not going to let you trade my knight off, and if you now take on d3, I'm gonna take with the knight. So keep control of the e5 pawn. And in the game, short castle was played, and after bishop e3 just developing, now a5 was played. So here you cannot take this pawn because there's bishop takes b6, you lose the knight. All right. So you always have to calculate these small tactics. In the game, a5 was played, and after bishop takes g6, knight takes g6, now both of these knights are attacking the e5 pawn. So white here basically needs to find a good way to defend it. If you go f4 here immediately to defend it, then after bishop takes, queen takes, okay, now the pawn is actually safe. But after, for example, a4 and let's say knight d4, and after trade, the knight will go will reroute back to f5, and the d4 pawn is now suddenly a weakness. So the e5 pawn may be now very solid, but the d4 pawn, the pawn who is protecting it, might now become a weakness. So in the game, instead of going f4 to protect the e5 pawn, in the game bishop takes b6 was played, and after queen takes b6, knight d3. So white is using the knight to defend the pawn here. And a4 was played, kicking this knight. Now the knight cannot even go to d4 to trade off. It just simply needs to go back to d2, but now it's just very passive. And in the game, a3 was played, keep on pushing. So Richard is keep pushing these pawns and gaining space on the queen side. And actually, by looking at these moves, they might seem just very normal, but the meanings, the ideas, the strategies behind all of these moves are actually really really high level. So they're actually they're coming from grandmasters ideas. So they're grandmaster ideas. So they do have their own meanings. For example, here, if you're just looking at this a3 move, you might say okay, it is just breaking up on the queen side, trying to open up some files to activate my rook. But for example, in grandmaster's eyes or in Richard's eyes, maybe in this game, in this move, a3, besides opening up files or activating the rook or trying to damage white's pawn structure, besides these words, he does have a lot of calculation in them, positional calculations, and also some tactics. So of course, if you can see all of these ideas, then of course grandmasters can see them too. So a3 and now b3. So of course white is not going to take on a3 because then it will fall for black's trick. Rook c8 was played, but now the main problem is that white has a new weakness, the c3 pawn. rook c1, rook c7. So black is trying to double up on the c file. c4, knight b4 takes, and now c takes d5. The reason that this is, well, actually c takes d5, I'm not going to consider it as a mistake, and actually this is one of the best moves here because, like, if you cannot, like, taking can also like damage black's pawn structure, right? So I don't really understand like why chess.com here gave it a small question mark. But I mean, of course, c takes d5 is okay. Like, it is one of the best moves here. But so there's knight f4, and after queen e3, knight takes d5, queen d3, and rook fc8. Now here you can also go rook c3 to like trade off some pieces. After rook takes, queen takes, like let's say you just trade everything off. Even the material is equalized here, but you can see that because like black's pawns are just way too higher pushed than white's pawns, and this a2 pawn is also a big weakness, as well as the e5 pawn. Alright, so let's go back. So rook c3 should have been played, but in the game, this was played, and after rook c4, takes, queen d3, offering queen trade, and after queen e2, this is now a mistake because it falls for like knight f4. But here, if you take, the best option is actually to take on c3, and after knight takes c3, for example, like if white goes here to defend the a2 pawn, but now this is just way too passive. Actually, you should also know that, especially in rook endgames, the rooks like the like if it's an active rook, then like whether it is active or not, this is actually a very important fact, because your rooks act like if it's just really passive and staying on the back rank and defending pawns while your opponent's rook is very like active. So this is not allowed, because if that happens, then it's most likely that you're gonna lose because your rook is way too passive, like much more passive than your opponent's rook, and in the end, the rooks will be able to outplay this rook and also like win more pawns. So I'm not sure if you guys understand the saying because I'm using some really weird words and everything, and but I hope I've expressed the idea that like you guys can understand. So the rook needs to be active especially in endgames. For example, here, if you go rook a1, now this is not an active rook. This is a really passive rook that you should not allow. Like, you should not allow these kinds of things to happen in a real game. So, yeah. And that is why in the game, probably Peter thought that if takes happens, my rook will be too passive and I won't be able to hold this endgame. So I'm just going to try to keep the queens on the board and go for some counterplay. But after queen e2, there's now knight f4. And after queen e3, rook d8. Now, this is actually a brilliant move. I mean, for most of you guys, you might just take on e3, and after f takes e3, go for this endgame, which is also probably better because white's pawn structures are just way too, they're just too bad. But, I'm not going to, actually, I think I should have, first of all, paused this video and let you guys, I should have mentioned you guys to, pause this video first and think what black played. But anyways, here rook d8 was played. And this is a brilliant move given 2 exclamation marks. And it's actually worth it because now if you take on c3, this is actually like a tactic. If you take on c3, you go knight e2 and you can win the queen back as well as the a2 pawn. And if white goes, for example, basically there's nothing that white can do here. If he takes the knight, now there's rook takes d2. This rook is much more active than this rook, as well as the queen, and the a2 pawn is about to fall. So basically, after rook d8, there's nothing white can do. And in the game, knight f3 was played. But also, knight f3 is okay. You can also go knight e4, but now you lose the e5 pawn. But after knight f3, it's even worse, because now after queen takes c4, g3, rook d3, well, this is actually a mistake. Not the best move. Knight d3 is slightly better, because knight d3, now threatening to go knight b4, or also, like basically controlling all the squares that the rook can reach, like controlling all of white's pieces. And after, for example, if white goes queen b6 trying to create counterplay, you just go rook d7 to defend the pawns. And but you have to be careful of some back rank mating ideas, because your king is still, like, all of the pawns are not being pushed yet. So it's actually pretty necessary for you to go, for example, like h6 or g6 on the next move. So in the game, rook d3 was played, and after queen takes, and rook f3. Now this position, I think black is just gonna slowly but surely win this, even though the advantage is not still like a winning advantage, but black is in a situation where he cannot lose. So because white's pawn structures are just way too bad. In the game, rook b1 was played, and after takes, and g5. So opening up a window, we consider this as a window for the king, because you're giving like a path for the king to escape when there are back rank checks. Rook b3 attacking the pawn, and now rook e4. So you can see that black is actually giving up this like outside pass pawn for this pawn. If it were to, like, like defending the pawn this way is also possible. You can just move up the king this way. But Richard also calculated rook e4, which is probably a little bit like worse than rook a4, but still holding the advantage. Takes, king d2, king d7, up with the king, and now like h6. So you do have to know that you cannot really take here, because after takes, probably black is still gonna try to win this, but it's not that easy now, because even though you still have an outside pass pawn, but it's never gonna be pushed in a very quick way, because the king is right in front of it, and it is like a rook file pawn. So like rook file pawns, they're always really like special, and sometimes it's a winning, like it's win for them, but sometimes, like most of the times, it's a draw. So in the game, that is why h6 was instead played, and after takes, rook a8, king f5, push, rook a2, just follow the pawn behind, rook a5, e5, pushing the pawns. Like if in this position, if black, for example, has only 2 pawns on the king side, let's say he doesn't have this e5 pawn, then this will be a draw. But unfortunately, black is still up a pawn, and a pawn is a pawn, and it's enough for black to win. And you can see that already here there are some time scrambles, because white only has 2 minutes left on the clock, and black has 3 minutes, like about 4 minutes on the clock. So the reason that I'm mentioning like the time is because in this tournament, the time format is actually very special. It is 20 minutes plus 0, like with no increment at all. So that's why both sides need to play very fast. f6, and these are all just very normal moves, so we're gonna go over them. So yeah, now it is a double pass pawn versus a outside pass pawn, and of course the double pawns are much faster. So push, and you can see that already in this position, I mean, black is winning, of course, but I mean, like all of these moves, he doesn't really have any drawing chances. And also he is in some time scrambles. He only has 50 seconds left on the clock, while Richard still has 2 minutes left on the clock. So after push, queen, I mean, this is just an easily winning position. If the king were like if it were on d4 or even on c5, I think if it were like a little bit closer to the action, it might still be able to hold the draw. But unfortunately, that is not going to happen, because the king is just too far away from the action, and this is just going to be easily winning. And here, Peter resigned the game because he is unable to stop promotion on the next move. Like here, promote, takes, and the pawn will promote. So and I'm sure that Richard knows how to mate with one queen. So yeah, and that is why Peter here resigned the game. Now this game, like the quality of this game is probably like not that high. Both sides only have an accuracy, like Richard has an accuracy of 87.5, while Peter has an accuracy of 83.2. So both players actually played normally, like they are like playing in their normal ways. But in the end, I think Richard shows more understanding of the positions, especially in the opening part, and immediately, slowly but surely, won this game with no pressure at all. So I hope you guys learned something from this game, and hope you guys like my videos. You can leave comments down below to tell me, and please subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!